Shelby, I'm ready for PowerPoint. Hi, Reese. Thanks for joining. All right, so names and email addresses in the chat, please, if you would like to receive some materials after. Not sure why this title slide's a little bit off center, but tonight we will be talking about routines and easing power struggles. Just email addresses are fine in the chat with your name. Perfect. So go ahead, Shelby, with the first slide. And I know everyone's kind of busy putting their names in, but first I just want to give some examples of what I mean when I say power struggle. What does that look like, right? We've all been there. We all have been a part of a power struggle at some point. They're very common and very normal, especially with little ones in early childhood. And so I'm sure some of these examples sound familiar. You might be at the store and your child might want a toy that they cannot have. Maybe you have already said no, but they continue to plead for it and they begin crying or screaming in the cart, or they might fall to the floor if they're walking. Or maybe you are at the park and you tell your child it's time to go home for dinner, but they refuse and you continue on insisting that you leave immediately. They might climb up on the playground structure to hide from you or sit on the ground and cry and scream. You might tell your child it's time to clean up their toys before bath time, but maybe they're refusing. And you're continuing to just wait for them to clean up. You're demanding them to do so repeatedly, but they continue to just ignore or continue playing or tell you no. Maybe they throw their toys in protest. Or maybe it's bedtime, but your child refuses to put the tablet away and get ready. And then when you remove it from their hands, they begin to scream and cry, maybe flop on the floor. All these things kind of sound similar. There's a pattern there. These are all examples of power struggles. On the next slide, I just want to give a brief definition of what a power struggle is. A power struggle occurs when two or more people compete for control over a situation. So both people disagree and they want to get their way. In this context, it usually occurs when a child is refusing to do something or ignoring directions, and the adult continues to insist on it being done in that particular way or in that particular moment. It involves very little flexibility, very little negotiation, very little compromise. And when neither the parent nor the child budges or decides to collaborate to solve the problem, the ongoing struggle can become a battle of wills, so to speak, where the adult keeps saying, yes, do this now, and the child keeps saying, no, I don't want to. And the longer this argument carries on, the more difficult it can become for the child to cooperate. Usually you know that you're in a power struggle when you're given when you have given a direction or you've set an expectation or a limit repeatedly, and your child's still opposing it. Power struggles can escalate both the adult and the child's emotions as tensions rise and everyone becomes more frustrated and more stressed. Our stress responses kick in, and usually there's a moment where the adult might say something like, I'm the adult, do it because I said so, and we have that reflex kicking in where you really are trying to grasp for control over your child. And it creates an unwinnable situation. Go ahead with the next slide, Shelby. So power struggles create unwinnable situations by the nature of you giving a limit that now you have to uphold. Because if you give in to what the child is insisting on, then your child learns that that limit testing worked for them and it helped them get out of doing something they didn't want to do. So often parents will turn to empty threats of consequences that they don't intend on enforcing in an effort to make the child fear a punishment for not complying. But by doing this, you're setting another action for yourself to uphold. Otherwise, the consequence has no effect if it's just an empty threat. So it just kind of starts to layer on top of itself once we get into a power struggle. So here are some examples of, what ends up happening sometimes during a power struggle. Let's say your child is now totally emotionally escalated. They're crying or screaming, kicking, throwing, rolling on the floor, and you as the adult are completely depleted. You both have raised your volume, you both have adrenaline and stress pumping through your body, you both feel angry, and you feel like you have no more leverage to gain their cooperation. What ends up happening? A few things normally end up happening. Either the expectation that you set gets dropped in an effort to move on, or you complete the direction for them. So maybe if they were told to clean up and they don't, you start to clean up for them, which teaches the child that they were able to avoid that direction. So either the expectation gets dropped or the expectation is forced. So for example, if it's time to get ready for bath time, but they're not ready, if you start to angrily undress them and dump them into the bathtub in a less than gentle way, or disregard their emotional state and just force that direction to be followed, that can just continue the escalation of the child and damage the relationship, and it can just cause all these other issues in the moment and also longer term. Or the child gets isolated. They're maybe told to go to the room alone, or they get left alone, when really in that moment they are just needing some help calming down or dealing with their disappointment or their frustration. Maybe they need hugs or squeezes. Maybe they need to just take a break, but have you nearby so they know that you're there to help. But either way, some forms of punishment can make the child feel unsafe, and again, can further escalate the child. Or sometimes the consequence that was threatened becomes enforced. So maybe you remove the tablet from their hands, or you tell them that they lost TV time that night, whatever the consequence was that you threatened earlier. And when you say that, then the escalation continues again. So it kind of creates all these unwinnable situations if we don't know how to navigate power struggles in a different way. So we're going to talk about routines and how they can help prevent power struggles, as well as some other strategies at the end to kind of help you lessen power struggles or avoid them. Of course, your child still will have meltdowns or will still have tantrums at times, but if we can learn some ways to regulate ourselves and implement our routines in a consistent way, that can help reduce power struggles. So on the next slide, I just want to give a little bit of information about the difference between a schedule and a routine. So you might notice that a lot of the examples of power struggles I gave earlier relate to transitions in a child's day. So it might relate to having them put their toys away because it's time for bath or bedtime. Or maybe it relates to telling them to put their jacket on because you have to leave the house right now. Or telling them it's time to leave somewhere fun like the park. All of these things are part of your schedule in your day, and you have routines within that schedule. And so a lot of times power struggles happen around these kinds of directions. But developing routines and informing children of the day's schedule can help reduce those power struggles. So it can really help to do what's called pre-teaching and inform them of what's coming up next, so that they can learn what to expect and they have some time to process what they're going to have to do soon. This gives them a notice in advance about a transition that's coming up, what they can expect to do that day, how much longer they have to play, that kind of thing. And so that can really help them with that transition. Schedules are more centered on the order of events in a day or the duration, how long an activity lasts. For example, let's say 7 p.m. hits and you know that's the part of your schedule where they need to start getting ready for bed. So then you'll start doing the bedtime routine. The routines are kind of like our steps in our schedule. And so routines are more centered around the regular actions that take place consistently when a certain procedure is performed. So routines are kind of the process of getting ready for bed, or the dinner routine, or the bath time routine. Schedules can change quite often, but the routines would hopefully remain pretty consistent. So even if they start to get ready for bed at 6:30 instead of 7, that is a change in your schedule, but the routine would remain consistent. What they do to get ready for bed would remain consistent. Kids don't obviously have a sense of time in early childhood, so they don't know the differences with the schedule sometimes. They don't know how much longer they have to play. They don't know it's already been 5 or 10 or 25 minutes. So the schedules mean less to them than the routines do. The routines are what they know, and the routines are what should be consistent every day, if possible. On the next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about why routines help children and what they can do for you. Having consistent routines can increase a child's confidence and independence, as well as their responsibility, because they learn that they know what to do. And once they do it successfully, they feel good about themselves, and it motivates them to build on those skills and to do that routine more and more independently. Routines can teach children how to balance enjoyable, fun activities like playtime or watching TV with the activities that need to be done on a daily basis that are a little bit less fun or less motivating. So they learn that, we played for a while, but now it's time to take our bath so we can get ready for bed. They kind of learn that balance when it's something that is consistent for them. Routines also can create healthy habits that they can continue to implement as they develop. So if you include steps like brushing teeth, washing hands, going for a walk with the family, having emotional check-ins, those kinds of routines can help build healthy habits that they can continue and help them develop. And then lastly, routines are a primary method of creating predictability for a child and therefore easing power struggles, especially around transitions. That's kind of the whole gist of our class tonight, is that with that predictability of a consistent routine, it can kind of help gain some cooperation from your child and helps everything kind of go a little bit more smoothly throughout transitions. Okay, so on the next slide, just a little bit more information about why predictability is so helpful for kids. I would assume that most of us don't like to be caught off guard. Even as adults, we learn to be flexible when we're expecting something to happen a certain way or we're waiting for something and then the situation changes. But, for the most part, we adapt and we adjust as needed. And we handle any stress or disappointment that might come up for us. But sometimes we still get really disappointed when our plans change or something surprises us that we didn't expect. And children especially have this experience because they don't have that skill yet to really be able to predict what's coming or to manage their emotional response when they do feel really mad or disappointed about a change. So predictability can reduce children's stress by allowing children to experience familiar patterns and knowing what to expect and what comes next. Predictability can teach children that they are in a secure environment and that the relationships with their caregivers are secure and that they know that the caregiver will help them and is a safe adult. It reduces their stress by easing those what if worries that they might have. Like I said, children don't always know how to put the information together to plan or predict what's coming next. So a lot of times they need to be told what to plan for and they need help preparing. And then their capacity for handling stress and their emotions is obviously a lot more limited than adults, and it develops as they develop. So fewer stressful surprises in their day mean there will be fewer struggles. Predictability can also help children's drive, it can help limit their drive to test limits, which also is a big cause of power struggles. Like we said, transitions are really hard, especially for little ones. And so a predictable routine can prompt the transition and as it approaches, and it can help them mentally shift so that they know what to expect, they know what to do. It's just part of what they do every day. And then you'll see a little bit less limit testing if you're consistent and if you have follow through. Okay, so on the next slide, how do we create a predictable and consistent routine? First of all, there is no perfect routine for all families because every family is different. Every day is a little bit different, but you should kind of design a routine based on your family's unique situation and needs. You might want to think about a routine that is well planned, that is something that is reasonable and regular, something that is probably going to happen every day. You don't want to make promises of things in your routine that you just can't uphold every day. And you want to make sure that everyone has a reasonable role in the family that they understand. So you can create routines around getting ready for daycare or school, if they're going in person right now, getting ready for mealtime or snack time, getting ready for nap time or bedtime, a routine for bath time. You can create a little routine for some housekeeping or chores, or maybe even a routine for emotional check-ins or family time where you have time to cuddle or go on a walk or do something all together, play something all together. Just keeping in mind that the routine should be age appropriate based on your child's development, and the routine basically can just help a family know who should do what, where they should do it, and in what order and how often. So routines can really just help everyone function and move through their day. Shelby, can I see the next slide? I think I'm on that part. I think, there we go. I don't think I told you to switch it. So like we said, or like I've been repeating, it's really important to make sure that the routines are consistent and that they're realistic. It's helpful to start small and build upon your routines as they are established, that again, so your children feel successful and capable. And so you can start by choosing just one part of the day that needs more structure, like dinner time, bath time, bedtime, some of those examples I mentioned before. The first step in teaching the routine is to explicitly teach the steps one by one. And this will involve modeling it for your child. So you can show them how each step goes, do it with them and practice it with them. And eventually they can start to do some of those steps on their own. They might still need your help. You might need to, reach in with your hands and do one part for them. But over time, they will learn to do that routine independently as you practice with them. And it's important to be ready to embrace some messes as you're going through the steps, and expect progress and not perfection. Kids learn through mistakes and through trying things and through play. So you might need to be a little silly with it. But as kids are learning a routine or a skill, sometimes we just have a mess that then they can clean up with you. So it's important to kind of remain realistic and just know it's not necessarily going to go perfectly the first time or the first few times. And let's see. I wanted to just give an example really quick on this slide before we move to the next one about consistency. So for example, let's say you're practicing a bedtime routine that involves putting on pajamas. Sorry, I'm just gonna ask everyone to mute their microphones. I tried to do it, but I don't think I'm okay. Thank you. So let's say for example, you're practicing a bedtime routine with your children that involves putting on pajamas, brushing teeth, choosing one or two books to read, and then turning off the lights after you give some hugs. There are parts of that routine that can be adjusted and have some flexibility, and then there are parts that should remain consistent. And so the parts that should remain consistent are where you really want to make sure you don't allow any limit testing. So if they want to choose 3 books one night, or if they don't want to do the book, they want to do their tablet, whatever change you give into is now going to be kind of a new expectation. So if you really want to stick to 1 or 2 books, that's one part of the routine that you're going to want to have consistently stay the same. Because if one night, if instead of 1 or 2 books, you read 4 or 5, they now have a new expectation of what they're able to do, and they might start to negotiate with you about that. And so some nights you might not have time for that, and then that can lead to those power struggles. So that's kind of an example of how being consistent with the important parts of the routine can help minimize those power struggles in the future. And again, that's part of maintaining realistic expectations as well. Maybe they need a little bit more time to put on their pajamas because they want to do it themselves. Maybe they want to brush their teeth themselves. So you might need to just account for giving them a little bit more time to do that when they're learning. Yeah, this can all help kind of make sure that everyone is relaxed and ready for bed. The more consistent the routine can be and the less power struggles there are, the more calm their bodies will be, and then the quicker they'll go to sleep. So it kind of just helps everyone move through that routine. Go ahead with the next slide. And as I was describing power struggles before, I kind of mentioned how it's really a grasp for control in the situation. And I also mentioned how adults have a much greater capacity to adjust to feeling disappointed or frustrated. We also have a lot more self-discipline to uphold the rules or what's expected of us, but children need a lot more help with that. So routines can be much more effective when you don't just consider your own needs as an adult or the schedule that you have, or like the fact that you made this specific dinner and you spent all this time on it and they aren't eating it. You might just need to consider their needs and kind of put yourself in their 4-year-old, 3-year-old mind, whatever age they are, and understand that they might need a little bit of extra time to transition. They might need to try something themselves or finish something that they started. A lot of times adults are just functioning on what we have to do and what we have going on. For example, if we know that we need to leave the house at 8 a.m. to get to our destination on time, that's our adult priority, when maybe our child is trying to put on their jacket like you directed them to, but they really want to do it themselves, or they really want to be able to zip it themselves. And so instead of trying to have power over your child or control of your child, you might need to have power with them and kind of try to find ways to partner with them and problem solve together. So you can name that you see what they're trying to do. You can say, I see you're trying to zip up your coat by yourself. It looks pretty tricky. Do you need help, or can I help you? Or you can do one part of the routine while they do the other part of the routine. Things like this can really help them feel like you are caring with them instead of trying to have power over them. And it might also help to have visual reminders around your house to show the steps of the routine. This is especially helpful for bedtime or bath time. You can have, pictures of them doing the different steps so you can refer to it and show them what's coming next. Again, when they feel successful, they're more motivated to do it themselves going forward. And again, if they aren't quite sure how to do the next step, it's unrealistic to expect them to follow that direction perfectly. So sometimes they just need a little bit of help or time, or maybe they just need you to name their feelings for them and help them through it. It's important to be emotionally available for their emotional responses when they're feeling frustrated or sad or disappointed, because your response teaches them what to do with their emotions. So ignoring negative behavior is a little bit different than ignoring your child's emotional response to something. Yeah, this is just one way to kind of pair with them, connect with them, and make sure that they know that you see what's going on for them, and that you're there to help through the process. And let's see, is there anything else? Does anyone have any questions so far? I just want to take a second to pause, and I know this has been a lot of information. I have more as well, but how's everyone doing? Does anyone have any questions right now? No? Okay. All right. Well, before we leave this slide, I just want to give one final example about partnering with your child. Just to kind of, I guess, summarize what I mean by this slide. So let's say it's time for your child to get into the bath, but they've been building something with their Legos and they're not done yet. And so when you tell them it's time to get into the bathtub, maybe they haven't had enough warnings yet. It can really help to kind of give them a time countdown or set a timer for them. But maybe you tell them it's time to get in the bath, they have to go right now, and they become really overwhelmed and frustrated because they really wanted to finish building what they were building with their Legos. To use this as a teachable moment or to connect with them, you can use this chance to explain your need, which is that they clean their body before bed. and then ask them what they want or what their need is. And then you can solve the problem together. So you can say, are you trying to finish what you're building? Or you can say, you can give them a choice, like, do you want to put on 5 more Legos or 3 more Legos? Or you can kind of negotiate a little bit, and there's a little bit of room for that in our routines. That's one part of the routine that can be a little bit flexible. Again, you can set a timer and then give them warnings as it counts down. And then once it's done, maybe you can even offer to help them clean up, and then obviously maybe they would do most of it, but they just would feel a bit more like you're partnering with them as opposed to having power over them, and it creates less resistance on their end, to feel like there's some cooperation there from you as well. Or even you could take a photo of their creation of their tower before they clean it up so that they can save that. These are all different ways to meet the child's need of not feeling ready to leave the activity they're involved in, while also getting your need met of having them follow the routine of taking a bath, all while avoiding a power struggle. So part of this is on the next slide. Part of what I just described is offering acceptable choices. So part of having power with your child or partnering with your child instead of having power over them is offering choices that allows your child to feel like they have some control in the situation, that they can make a decision with you. And it helps build their critical thinking skills and their self-responsibility as well. It's really important when you're offering choices to make sure that the choices you offer are real choices, that you are ready and willing to accept, not choices that are not a realistic option or something that you don't want to follow through on. Because then you can get caught in that trap where you offer something that you think is a desirable choice, and then one that you think is undesirable, and then they surprise you and they choose the one that you didn't think they would want. And now you're expected to uphold that. So it helps to keep the options simple by just offering 2 choices, maybe a third in mind if you need a backup, just in case you're still met with refusal. And then just explaining what is not a choice as well. So that can help gain some of their cooperation through, it's basically negotiation. When you set boundaries as a parent, you can offer choices within those boundaries, and then it's on them to choose what they want. So again, you can offer something like, if they ask for something that's not available, you can just reiterate, Z is not a choice, but right now you can choose X or Y. An example of this would be, again, if they don't want to clean up their toys before bath time, like I was saying with the Legos, you can offer 3 or 5 more minutes instead of timer. You can ask them how many Legos they want to put on and give them a number of, do you want to put 3 or 5 more Legos on? You can ask them if they want to undress themselves or have you do it. You can have them choose what bath toys they're going to want to help them transition. These are all different ways to help them get through that transition and make choices and feel like they have some control over the routine. And then, of course, they might ask why something is not a choice, and it can help to partner with them and explain in an age-appropriate way why something's not a choice or why you're giving a certain direction. Sometimes kids just need to know why something is the way it is, and then they're willing to cooperate and move through that without having that power struggle. When kids feel like things are just happening arbitrarily around them or for no reason, that can evoke some opposition from them or some rebellion, and they might try to grasp for some of that control. So when they understand why something's happening and they're offered a choice, they can build in their skills and flexible thinking and problem solving, and they can move through that direction a little bit easier. Next slide. Part of building your routine, like we've said, is accounting for a little bit of flexibility, because as we know, not everything goes according to plan. So just because your routine worked last week doesn't mean it's going to work every day this week. And it helps to assess what your week will look like and try to plan ahead and make the routine work for you. So it doesn't hurt to have a couple different versions of your routine. And this can also help your child practice their flexibility as well. But this is where partnering with your child, being emotionally available, pre-teaching them what's going to be different, and offering choices can really come in handy. Ultimately, you are the one guiding them through their routine. So as long as you help them navigate those differences that might occur, whatever emotions that get stirred up because things are different, As long as you're helping them navigate those, they should still feel supported enough to carry on and adjust accordingly, especially if they're offered other choices or told ahead of time that something's going to be different. And this is why it helps to focus on the routine itself and not our schedule, because routines can really occur any time of day, and they can be incorporated into various different schedules that we might have. Sometimes we can't do anything about what our schedule is, especially when we have to keep up with work and personal responsibilities and whatnot. But the routine itself can be a little bit flexible and can be slightly changed to fit your schedule on a daily basis. You just want to keep in mind those parts of the routine that need to stay the same, like the 1 or 2 books or whatever the expectation is that you want to remain consistent. I think the next slide is one of my last, maybe my last slide. I have 4 different ways that you can ease power struggles other than just using the routines. And some of these we've talked about throughout this process, but these are just some other strategies to use when you're either in a power struggle or when you sense one might be coming on, or when you know you have to give a direction that your child is not going to like, or especially around transitions in your day. First, one strategy is to connect with your child first before you redirect them. As we mentioned, power struggles happen when your child feels that you are not on the same team and that you both want something different and you both are insisting. And so some power struggle prevention can be something like spending time with them each morning, even just 5 minutes, connecting with them, snuggling or tickling or roughhousing or coloring, dancing. You can read together, just sometime every morning to connect with them, or even during their bedtime routine. Or when they're escalated, if you're in the moment and they're becoming upset, you can help them name their emotions. You can get on their level and, make sure that they understand that you see what's happening for them. And when they feel heard and they feel listened to, then they're more likely to cooperate and calm down, especially if you can model some deep breathing or other coping skills. You can offer that they can take a break and just remaining nearby, remaining connected. That's one way that children really can feel more secure, and it can lessen their stress and those big feelings that they have. Another strategy is to, again, model those calm down strategies. So this can look like, again, kneeling down on their level, getting some eye contact, showing them how to take a deep breath and having them do that with you. There's lots of fun ways to do some deep breathing with kids. My favorite is the volcano breath, where you put your hands together. It's also called a yoga breath. You put your hands together and you breathe in and breathe out. You can also smell the flower and blow out the candle. Some of these are just some fun ways that the kids can really take some deep breaths to calm down their body. You can also help them practice counting, or try to maybe switch the brain's focus onto something else. And it can also help you restore yourself to a calm state, and so that you can try to see the situation through your child's eyes. Children are like sponges, and so they really absorb everything that's around them. And so when you model these calm down strategies, they're more likely to learn those self-regulation skills as well. And then they can problem solve with you, and you can avoid the power struggle. Of course, this doesn't always work magically every single time. These are just tips that can really help them regulate those emotional responses. Another way to kind of navigate power struggles would be to get a little creative in meeting your goal. So if you think about your goal and different ways that you can get there, this can help in the situation, because it refocuses us on what's most important. And it can change the way that we guide them through, instead of just making demands or giving orders to the kids. It can help us get some compliance and cooperation by giving them choices or being a little bit creative with how we tell them to do the next direction. So for example, instead of giving them a command that might evoke some refusal, you can ask an open-ended question. Asking a yes or no question instead, such as, do you want to go get in the car? Or can you put your jacket on? They might just flat out say no and refuse, and then you have a power struggle immediately. So first, instead, you can introduce the need, which is saying something like, okay, it's almost time to leave. In 5 minutes, we have to leave the house. And you can maybe set a timer. That's the pre-teaching part. It might be time to be a little bit silly with them or a little bit playful. You can offer to have a race to the car. You can offer a hug or ask them to help you with something. You can get creative and use some external motivator, like asking them if they've ever heard the story of the purple giraffe, and then they say no. And you say, oh, well, I'll tell it to you when we get in the car. We have to go buckle up first. And using those first then statements can really help them get to something that they want by doing something that you need them to do first. And then, of course, you have to make up a story about a purple giraffe once you're in the car, but at least they're in the car seat. At least they're in the car. You might offer those open-ended questions, like I mentioned, something like saying, what song do you want to listen to when we get into the car? Or offering choices again. You can make it a scavenger hunt or play an I Spy game. You can even pose a fake problem and say, uh-oh, we've got a problem. We're almost going to be late and we don't have our shoes on. What should we do? And that can get them excited because they know the answer. And then they'll tell you they got to get their shoes on. So overall, these are all just a lot of different creative ways to avoid the power struggle by offering choices, connecting with your child, modeling those calm down strategies, and even sometimes giving implicit directions, which are not just a flat out command, but maybe just stating the need that you have. Like, we need to get our shoes on, we need to leave, and then having them help you with something. Different ways like that can kind of just create some cooperation, and overall you can avoid the power struggle. Children love to be praised, they love to play, and they love encouragement. So all of those strategies can really help. And again, just consistent routines and trying to just maintain the expectations that you feel are realistic for your child in that moment. I don't think I have another slide unless it's just the end slide. So we have about 20 minutes before the scheduled end time. If anyone has any questions or wants to talk about anything that came up,